Welcome to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
And I'm your co-host, Pastor Wayne Moore.
Always a pleasure to host with you.
It is good always to be in your presence, because your presence truly makes a difference.
Thank you. That sounds like a commercial.
Yeah, that's what I say at church all the time.
Speaking of presence, we have some great.
Lee Cossell and Crawley are here with us. Fervent Care Christian Academy, and we have Marion County Public Health Department.
New sponsor.
Yeah, new sponsor. Doing some things with the Safe Sleep program, and we're going to make sure the community knows everything about that.
Yeah.
Because we're losing, because of the infant mortality rate is rising. We have one of the worst.
One of the highest.
One of the highest. Well, that's not the good word to use, is the worst. One of the highest infant mortality rates on the face of the globe. And Marion County Health is addressing that issue, and we need to cheer them on in this event.
And I did a funeral last year, which is so sad.
Yeah.
And perhaps this could have helped out as it grows.
And as we go, we hope our churches throughout the community will do safe sleep workshops. Call Marion County Health. They'll be happy to come out and do that for you. Make sure that your parishioners know what's happening with their children when they sleep.
Yeah. And speaking of Marion County, in just a few moments we'll be joined by the Chief of Police for Marion County.
Yeah, we have one of the greatest chiefs we've had in a while, through Chief Roach, and he's trying to be involved in community engagement, and I think that's important in law enforcement, to be involved in the community. He's got some things going around in the community that I'm hearing some things as it relates to body cams.
Yeah.
He's going to talk to us about that.
And we need to know about that.
Yeah, we need to know.
So stay with us. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
Co-host Pastor Wayne Moore.
And we're joined by Chief of Police for Indianapolis, Chief Brian Roach.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you, Chief. You're looking good today.
Thanks.
You cleaned
Out
up
of uniform.
You cleaned up real well.
Different uniform.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Got a lot going on in the city of Indianapolis, especially relates to law enforcement.
We do. We've got a lot of balls in the air, and it seems like you're never able to complete something when there's another idea out there, because we always want to try and get better. And it's being on shows like this that I think helps us connect with the community so that we have an understanding of where we need to improve.
Well, this is one of the best shows on TV. People just
that's what I hear.
Yeah, hadn't recognized it yet, but it's here. Tell us about what's going on with this body cam. It's buzzing throughout the community, and we're the type of show that where if we want to know something, we go straight to the source, and we have the chief here to tell us. So, tell us what's going to happen with this body cam.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that opportunity. If you look around the nation, most large agencies like us have already gone to a body-worn camera program. Probably since 2014. Now, a lot of those cities were forced into it because of a consent decree or by the Department of Justice. But I can tell you, having been around the police department, that I'm one of those guys that have pushed it off for a while. So if anybody wants to blame me or say why it hasn't happened before, the reason is pretty specific. Knowing our budget, the dollars just weren't there. It wasn't until the last few years, and the focus has been getting more policemen on the street, because we really saw a downturn of our sworn personnel. So the focus dollar-wise has been getting more policemen on the street. So that's been the focus. I hope to reach that number at the end of this year. And so I think it's an appropriate time budget-wise to start talking about that 2020 budget and what that looks like. And I think it's important that I'm able to present to the community and the council and the mayor, here's what a body-worn camera program costs. We also struggle technology-wise, so the infrastructure of the city couldn't ingest all that video. And they've done a lot of upgrades with the Information Services Agency within the police department, or within the entire enterprise. So now I think they'll tell us that we're ready technology-wise. So we want to make sure that we do it right. By pushing it off, we've had the opportunity to see other cities do it. We've had a couple forums here in the last year where we had the city of Seattle, Cincinnati, some professors who have looked at all the studies. And so we had some forums last year about what does that mean. And so this year I think we're ready. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the officers have input and the community has input. So a lot of times people think, and you'll have to cut me off, a lot of times people think that it's just a matter of purchasing a camera, but that's just a piece of it. The hardware is kind of easy, and everybody's hardware is very similar. The difficult part is keeping that on the officer, right, and putting it in a place where it captures that officer's natural vision, right, so that we see what he saw or she saw. But there's a lot of technology on the back end. That information has to be transferred, whether it's wireless or at a docking station where you connect it. And then there's got to be storage to that. And then there's got to be software on the back end that enables us to redact things. So there's some things that people don't want to see, right? We don't want to put juveniles in for everybody to see.
And that was a concern of Dr. David Wantz at one point when Indianapolis visited this idea. The privacy of people, when you go in someone's home, you got the camera on, people may not want to be on camera or in someone's car.
Right.
Those kind of issues. So have you all been able to get past those concerns?
Yeah, so it's how do you protect the community and how do you protect the officer? And there's got to be a balance there. And so
And a policy.
Right.
I think that's what the community is concerned about.
Right, so we have a draft, so we're calling it a standard operating procedure because it's something that we can apply just for the pilot project, and it's fluid, so we can change it, and it doesn't take, it's not as difficult to change an SOP as it is a general order. General order takes a committee together. So within the policy, right now what the policy says is that the officer will turn it on when he engages, when he's called on a run, right, or when he engages in some form of law enforcement activity. So he'll turn that on. Right now in the policy, that will stay on until that interaction is over. That gets a little sticky, and let me be specific a little bit. So let's say there's the officers are always on the scene first before a detective comes. So let's say there's a sex crime that's been perpetrated, right? And I'm sitting there with the victim of that. And I'm waiting on a detective to come, and so I don't know that those conversations and the constant filming of that victim needs to be there, and so I want to allow officers the discretion and to humanize them, to allow them to make that sort of decision. But the baseline is that will be on until it's complete. But there's got to be some discretion in there. We tossed around, and again, this is a pilot, and we're having meetings with the community, so we want to hear from them. There's also a survey that IUPUI is doing for the community. We want to make sure that right now in the policy, if you ask me to turn it off and we're engaged in some sort of law enforcement initiative.
You have to turn it off.
Well, right now the policy says no.
Okay.
And so, but that's because we're there for some reason, right? And if everybody tells me to turn it off, then I think the interaction between the two of us is going to be different. If I can show up and they say turn it off, then I'm not sure why we have it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but there's a balance there.
Yeah.
But right now the policy reads that we'll keep it on.
Okay.
So the body cameras, in some of the research I did, it started out in California. It tested really well. The folks in New York thought it was really great. It did really well in New York. Folks in Washington, D.C. tried it. Didn't work out very well for them. It appeared that the citizens and the officers continued on in behavior as they would. So it's working in some cities, doesn't work in some. How do you perceive with regard to the temperament of the people who live in Indianapolis? Do you think we'll see the success that they had in California and New York as opposed to Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, so that's part of why we're having these community conversations, and I think we've had 4 so far, and we'll continue to have them. I'm getting mixed messages, right? I think so. I think the baseline of this is trust and transparency, right? And I think the video allows for that. And so I think the community is standing back a little bit, saying, well, if I'm not going to be able to view it, I'm not sure I want to pay $2.5 to $3 million every year in order to have this.
Yeah, Chief, I think it needs to be mentioned too that That's out of your jurisdiction, the viewing of it. That's the prosecutor.
To some extent.
Yeah. So it's at the viewing of it, and I think the community needs to know that if an incident takes place and the community has a strong desire to see that video, that's not under your jurisdiction to do that. It has to move in certain areas for that to take place, and I think that needs to be conveyed as much as possible so people can understand that the police chief's office is not the place to get that done. Tell them where they can go to get that done if it happens.
Yeah, so let me try and remember the law a little bit, right? So there's the law addresses how an agency like the police department cannot release, right? So when you ask for a video, the law dictates 4 things of the reasons that I could articulate not to release it. One is if the video, if something in the video would have a substantial, would create a substantial risk to an individual, right? The second one is if the releasing of that video would keep them from having a fair trial.
Right.
The third one is it's an open investigation that's open right now. It doesn't mean, and once it's closed, I can't make that argument. And then the fourth one is releasing it would have some sort of negative public impact, right? So that's a broad area. But let's talk about those investigations when a crime is committed and things like that. I will always have a discussion with the prosecutor's office because we don't want to do anything that ruins the case for the individuals in there, nor the police officers in
that are involved.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a careful balance. At the same time, there's some exceptions to that.
Right.
If you are in the video, you can come view it. You can come view it twice. Doesn't mean you get a copy of it, but you can come view it. If you have a pastor, an attorney, I think that's helpful. They come in and police action shooting, for example.
Right.
And we show that video. And so there's some exceptions to the law that will allow us, hopefully, to get a message out sooner than people having to wait until there's been some sort of criminal decision.
And I think
We'll put a pin there. We got to take a quick break.
We'll be right back.
Stay with us. When we come back, we'll talk about how this technology is also causing there to be a sharp decrease in many cities with complaints against police officers. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. We were joined by Chief of Police, Indianapolis, Indiana, Chief Brian Roach.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
Just before the break, we were talking about the temperament of the folks who live in Indianapolis and the cities that have done this, particularly Washington, D.C. The report indicated that it wasn't working there, but you have information to help us to understand that. And there, too, complaints against police officers decreasing all over the place.
Right. So let's go to the temperament. All the cities have studied, right? Everybody wants to know what's the impact of an officer wearing a video camera. What's the impact on the officer's behavior, and what's the impact on the temperament, on the behavior of the people that are being videoed. And so most of those studies show that the behavior of the person that you're engaged with when they realize that they're being recorded, and also the behavior of the officer is a little different than it is when you're not being recorded. I mean, my mom always used to tell me, you play like you're on videotape when you're out, because, somebody's watching it. And so that's all I had ever read. And then there was the Washington, D.C. study that came out that showed that there was no impact. And so that's one of the last year when we had IUPUI do a series of forums around body-worn cameras. That's one of the questions I asked the educators and the researchers. And so you'll have people that will say that, and I don't want to disparage anything, people do research differently, but they'll argue, I think, that the way that was researched may have created that kind of response, right? Or that understanding that it really didn't change the behavior. But everything that I've seen it does. Lawrence Police Department, which is just out here at East, I've had many conversations with that chief, and they've seen a decline in complaints. And one of the things they also do is when someone, and a lot of times it's perception, right? Someone that interacts with the police department may have a perception of how they were treated. So what Lawrence is doing is bringing that complainant in and showing the video to them. They're in the video, right? That's one of those, and showing it to them, and then they'll determine whether it happened the way they remembered or it didn't.
And I think we've seen that, Dr. Moore, on radio and television, where people's on-air temperament is somewhat different from their off-air.
Right, most definitely, and even the officers.
Right.
We see that taking place, and I think it's going to be a plus. I really do. As a faith-based leader, I think it's going to be a plus. But I think the policy needs to be clear. The policy needs to be clear, and whatever that policy is, if there is something that transpires in our community, that law enforcement's policy will help undergird the consciousness of the community. That has to take place. If that doesn't take place, it would not be a great program. I think if you can get that to take place, it's going to help. It's going to do everything that it should do on the positive side.
I appreciate that, and it's got to be done early, right?
Right.
People have to be
Yeah.
aware of the policy before you and I engage.
Yeah. I
It's gotta be
think
a
whatever you got going on in these areas, update the community on what's transpiring, as the policy develops, and deliver it as a total package. And by the time it's delivered as a total package, they've walked through the process with you, and hopefully it's a process that both entities can work with.
A couple of things, Chief. The policy, as Dr. Moore has articulated, how will the community be educated? And then two, the 60-day trial period, what that's all about.
Yeah, so part of that development of the policy will dictate when that 60-day trial starts, right? So we really want to get that policy right. And policies, they're called general orders because they're general, right? So the policy will be general and won't be real specific. But what we're doing right now is about 2 times a week, we're visiting each section of town and having a community forum, and we're also Facebook Living it.
Right.
I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah.
It's live. And so more people are seeing it, and they're able to ask questions about the policy. So we're saying, we're going through the policy. This is what it looks like now. Most of the questions now are coming, when do you show the video? And that's a piece that's still missing, because I really want to articulate what the law says we can and can't do, and then ultimately how we're going to apply that law, if that makes sense. So I think that's a piece we're missing. And then I think through social media, through all our media venues, I think the pastors are getting together, a group that you have Thursday,
Yeah.
I think. And so we're going to try and be there. So I don't think we've allowed enough community conversation around that yet. So we're going to have to extend that a little bit until that policy is understood and it's more complete on our side.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to have those conversations. And when that policy is complete, that's when we can start that 60-day trial period. The intent there, we've chosen 3 different districts. Our South District, our East District, and then our North District. Those are typically the busiest districts, and we've just picked the middle shift. So it's the younger officers. There's more run volume and more interaction with people, quite frankly, between that 1:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. hours. So that only those officers through supervisors will have the body-worn cameras during the pilot project. Those will be the officers that will help us operationalize how we actually utilize that. And then we'll have people that understand the technology in the background, seeing how that works. And then we'll be with the prosecutor's office looking at that redaction video, because now discovery, so as an attorney, there's a criminal case here, now there's video. And there may not just be your video, but you may have video too. And so now these prosecutors, as they're creating their case, they're going to have to look at all of that, right? And so on the back end, that means people. And so that's part of the understanding of the pilot program.
It would be
What's
great.
that back end look like?
And talking about the back end, we got about a minute 15 left. Talking about the back end, some of these complaints against police officers can cost the city as much of $1 million.
Sure.
And with all of these complaints kind of going down, have you thought about what to do with all that extra money?
So my guess is it will be removed from my budget. Go somewhere else. But
Hopefully
no,
not.
hopefully
Yeah.
not. Hopefully those are dollars. I mean, that's a savings. And so hopefully when you bring a program in, you want to look at how did that impact the agency. So if there's dollars that were saved, how do you put that towards crime prevention, right? Is it dollars that go to the community so that we can develop programs that keep us from having to video bad situations? But
We'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, we're gonna watch the dollars.
Yeah.
Follow the money.
Well, thank you, Chief. You've been a great guest.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Chief.
appreciate it. Thanks for being here. We'll follow up.
And thank you. We have the rundown to come next. We'll be back after this. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us. I'm your host, James Jackson.
I'm your co-host, Dr. Wayne Moore.
And I'm your executive producer, Faith McKinney.
We have a lot of energy up here.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's phenomenal to be Lee Crossack and Crawley are with us, and Fervent Care Christian Academy, and Marion County Public Health Department with
New
their
sponsor.
Safe Sleep program, and we're just excited about it.
Indianapolis Healthy Start.
Yes, sir. Tell them, run down.
Run down. We
Yes.
had Chief Brian Roach.
Yes.
We were talking about the body cam. This is
Yeah.
a big deal. They're going
Big deal.
Big
through neighborhoods all over the city with this discussion.
Right. It's a great. I think it's good, but the policy still needs to be nailed down. When the issues come, we want a policy to where community and law enforcement can live with. One thing that needs to take place, in my estimation of this, is that Mr. Terry Curry needs to come out of the office
Oh,
and move around and talk about body cams and how he's going to address the issue.
our prosecutor.
Yes, he needs to come out of the
Yeah,
office.
well, we had an incident, and it was interesting. The video could not or
Right.
would not be released, and I guess that's a question that needs to be answered.
That's just one aspect of it. But he needs to come out of the office and work with law enforcement to let the community know what his procedure would be when he gets that particular situation.
And would you recommend that things be put on hold until that happens?
I would recommend that it would not go into full force until all that is, till it's taken care of, and he comes out of the office.
Let's go get him.
Yeah, well, he's coming out.
Well, maybe he'll come on and
Maybe-
talk
we'll
about
get
it
him on the
with
show.
us.
We'll
That'd
get
be
him on the
great.
show.
All right.
He's good at responding.
Responding.
To that.
Yeah.
I'll work on that.
Yeah.
But he needs to get in the community and help law enforcement with this item.
We'll see you next time.